Hi everyone, and welcome back to Exploring AWS. In this video, we are going to take a look at Amazon's Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC for short. Now, a VPC, the best, easiest way that I can probably explain this to you is a VPC is like having your own VRF in a data center. Actually, it's like having a data center all to yourself, right? So imagine that your organization says, okay, JP, Tom, Cindy, we're going to give you guys your own data center and you guys can do whatever you want within your data center. It's entirely up to you. You guys have complete control. Create whatever subnet you want, whatever VLANs you want, create whatever apps you want. It's your own data center. Have fun. That's really what a VPC is. A VPC is Amazon giving you your own tenant, your own little VRF, your own little slice of heaven within the cloud. But it's equivalent to like having your own data center. So imagine that you have data center 1, and within that data center you have multiple VLANs. So we'll just say for argument's sake here, for simplicity, we'll say that you have 4 VLANs, and each VLAN here is a /24. Well, what happens is when you create a VPC, you create a VPC with a /16 network. So for example, you'd have 10.0.0.0/16. And then all of your subnets, your subnetworks would be something like maybe 10.0.1.0/24. And then your next VLAN down here would be 10.0.2.0/24, and so on and so on and so on. All living within that /16 network that you created for your VPC. So that /16 network belongs to that data center. That data center is really equivalent to your VPC. And then within that data center, you have whatever you want. You can create whatever apps, whatever networks. You're going to have a routing table. So when you want anything within your VPC to get out and be able to use the internet, you're going to need a routing table. You're going to need default routes. You're going to need all sorts of stuff. So it really is like building out a data center, except you're doing it virtually. You're actually going through the menus, you're going through the wizards, and you're saying, okay, I need a new default route that points me out to the internet. I'm going to need an internet gateway, which is essentially like a proxy server, that you would have on-prem. So it's the same architecture. And I see a lot of folks get confused with a VPC and how they do different things, and they get confused with how, I can't get out to the internet. Why not? Did you check your routing table? No, I didn't know I had a routing table. A VPC is really like building out a data center in the cloud, except it belongs to you. So let's head over to the console and let's actually take a look at building a VPC. So once we're logged into our management console, you should see your VPC, or you should see some of the services under recently visited services. If you don't see it there, you can go down and you can find VPC within the list of services, or if you're really lazy like me and you don't feel like looking or reading, you can just type VPC in the search field and you can just click on VPC. Now, by default, we are going to get a number of different things when we first sign up for our AWS account. I, again, didn't touch anything here except for maybe the security groups, because we do know that we have a few EC2 instances running from when we were playing around in other videos. So we do have some security groups created. A couple things to pay attention to here, especially if you're going to go out and create more VPCs, because you are going to get one by default. You are going to get some things pre-configured for you that you may just want to go ahead and use. If you're testing and you're just playing around trying to get used to AWS, not a bad idea to use what they've already created, because there's less room for error or less room for you forgetting to do something. Now, within AWS, if we're going to go ahead and create our own VPC, you do want to pay attention to the region that you're in. We are right now in Northern Virginia. You want to make sure that you pick the region and availability zone that is closest to you. You probably want to make sure that you're not, picking one in Asia Pacific when you're, in New York or something like that. Now, I'm going to go ahead over here and I'm going to click on VPC. You can really click on 2 different areas, either here or here. It really doesn't matter. So we'll click on VPC. And this is the VPC that we've been given by default. Again, this is something that was created for us when we first logged in. Now, the only thing I did do was give this guy a name. So I clicked on the little notepad file here, the little note icon, and just typed in default because, it's just a habit I have. I don't like things being without a name. I did leave the subnets without a name only because I want you to see what it kind of looks like. But anyway, you'll notice that we have a VPC ID. This gets automatically generated for us. We don't have to do anything here. And then we've been given a CIDR of a /16 network, and our subnet is 172.31. So essentially these last 2 octets are going to be all usable space for us. So you can see here, gives us kind of some information here, gives us the CIDRs that are available. Not really too much here. You can see that we do have IPv4 and IPv6 support. So if we wanted to, we could add an IPv6 pool, or we could create a new VPC with just IPv6. Really, it's up to us. If I click on subnets here, you'll notice that I have 6 subnets. And again, see, no name. So when it comes time to actually add some instances to my VPC and then actually put them into a subnet, when it comes time to maybe link subnets together or link these to a security group or something like that, I may not know exactly what subnet it is. So it's always a good idea to go in and give these things a name. I know sometimes it's hard to scale, constantly keeping track of that, but it is a good idea to go in and do. Again, you'll notice that these are all part of the default VPC, and their subnet and CIDR all belong to our default VPC. So 172.31, and then we have .80, .32, .64, .16, etc. So these are all things, again, that are created for us automatically. If I come over here on the left and I click routing tables or route tables, you'll notice that I do have a default route table. If I click on routes, you'll notice that I have a default route here, 0000/0, and this is pointing to an internet gateway. So let me just head back over here to my pen for a second. If you think about the logic, really what you're doing is you're building a data center. So I have a VPC, and within that VPC, I have a subnet. Now, even though I have 6 subnets, but I have, we'll say times 6, I have a subnet, and that subnet points to a route table. And that route table routes all the traffic internally. So you can see here that I have a 172.31.0.0, and this is a local subnet. So if I had multiple VPCs, if I had multiple other subnets, maybe I'd want to add a route to go to another gateway or another VPC, etc. Right? I'm trying to keep it high level for everybody. But I have a route table, and that route table has a default route that allows me, default, to get out to the interwebs, right, through this internet gateway. So this is essentially equivalent to what you would consider a proxy server on-prem. So the architecture is relatively the same or identical as you would have in an on-prem network. You have a data center, you build a network, you build a VLAN. That VLAN has a default route, right? It has a gateway, whatever that gateway might be, and it points to a default route somewhere, and you route within your VPC. It's the same, or within your data center. It's the same thing. It's really not rocket science at all. If I go to internet gateways here, you'll see that I do have an internet gateway. If I click on it, it'll just give me some basic information about that internet gateway, let me know the VPC that it's in. So let's go back to the VPC dashboard, and what I want to do is I want to show you the VPC Wizard. Now you can go in and you can create all these things automatically, or manually, I should say. You could go in, you could create a VPC, then you could go in and you could manually create, 2 or 3 subnets underneath that VPC, create a new routing table, create an internet gateway. I mean, you could do this automatically, or we can just launch the VPC Wizard and we can just answer the questions. Now, answering the questions is normally much easier than doing everything manually. So we'll click on both public and private subnet. Now you can choose between one of these 4 options. If you're going to have, for example, a VPN connection between your on-prem and VPC, you'd probably select this one where you're going to have a hardware VPN access. So we're going to say both public and private subnets. We'll say select. Now here is where we're going to just add some basic information. We're just going to leave the defaults. So the CIDR block that I'm going to leave is 10.0.0.0/16. We're going to give this a name. So we'll say my VPC. And now it wants to know what the public subnet is going to be. We'll just leave that again to the default. For the availability zone, remember that we are in Northern Virginia. So for the availability zone, we'll say US 1A. Not a big deal. We'll leave the private subnet. Again, this is equivalent to public access like your DMZ. This would be private like your internal VLAN. We'll go ahead and say 1B for this availability zone. Now, it does need an elastic IP address. This is essentially a public address for your NAT gateway. So you obviously want all your traffic NATed, right? So what's going to happen is automatically we're going to get a NAT gateway to essentially NAT all our traffic, but we need an elastic IP address. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and type elastic. My spelling is terrible, elastic. And we'll find elastic IPs. I'm going to open this up in a new tab because I don't want to, let me actually move my pen over here. I don't want to destroy what I already have. You can see that I already have an elastic IP address, right? I already have one that's created. But what's cool is that if you look at where that belongs to, 172.31, it belongs to that other VPC. So I'm going to say allocate elastic IP address. I need to tell it what availability zone I want it to be in. I could give it a tag if I wanted to. I'm not going to, just because we're kind of rushing. We'll say allocate. In fact, let's give it a name. We'll say my elastic IP. And we'll say save. All right, so now we have a public address of 3.230.91.74. We'll head back over here to my elastic IP, and if I click this drop down, you'll notice that I have that IP address, 3.230.91.74. So this is pretty instant. So we'll go ahead and click that. This is going to be the public address for our NAT gateway. We want to enable DNS, hardware tenancy. We don't care. We'll leave it as the default. We're going to say create VPC. Now what's going to happen is that automatically AWS is going to go in, it's going to create a NAT gateway for us to NAT our traffic. It's going to go ahead and create those two subnets for us. And it's also going to go ahead and create that VPC automatically. So when we come back, we should be able to see all that completed. All right, cool. So our VPC is created. We'll go ahead and say OK. This should bring us back to our VPCs. And you can see that I now have two. I have my VPC and I have the default. Now, if I head over to subnets, you'll notice that I should have more subnets. And what's nice is that AWS has automatically named these for me. So now I know what I'm looking at. So I can see that these two subnets belong to my VPC. I can see the subnets. If I go down to route tables, I should have more than one route table now, because remember that I have a route table for the different VPCs that I have. If I go to internet gateways, I have two internet gateways. This one belongs to the default. This one belongs to my VPC. If I go down and I click NAT gateway, you'll see that I have one now with an elastic IP address of 3.230.91.74, and this essentially belongs to my new VPC that I've created. So this is essentially how we would build out this architecture. Again, you can do this manually, but going through the wizard really does make it a lot easier. So you can come back here to the dashboard and you can see two VPCs, 8 subnets, 3 route tables, 2 gateways. So this is how we can go through and we can build out, if we want to, our different data centers. Now, the one thing I am going to make sure that you do remember is that typically when we build a VPC, it's going to be based on the region that we're in. So what happens is if I go over here and I click on California, for example, you're going to see my VPC disappear. So let's wait for this to refresh. We should still see the default in theory, right? So we still see a default VPC, but we don't see the one that we created, because the one that we created is in the Northern Virginia region. So just remember that if you log in, you know you created a VPC and you don't see it, check your region. And before you create a VPC, make sure that you're in the region that you want. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. We'll see you guys in the next one.